Good morning, and welcome to the 2025 Presidential Symposium called The Beauty of ... Let me start by just recognizing how beautiful the Good Heart Theater looks. Isn't this fantastic? Such an improvement. Are you all comfortable in the chairs? Okay. I want to begin by thanking Provost Charlie Reardon and the Office of the Provost, but most importantly, Atheline Collins, I think she's still hiding backstage, Executive Director of the Cultural Center, along with her staff, Carol Mallison and Janine Rinaldi, who oversaw organization and execution of this symposium from the very beginning, working all summer so that we could all be sitting here today. Thank you, Atheline. Oh, there she is. A hearty thank you also to the four co-chairs of the symposium, Sasha Giordano, Russ Harbaugh, Jim Lee, I know your name, Jim, Ted Siegel, who thoughtfully shaped the content of this symposium and chose the dozen or so panels that we will enjoy over the next few days. This is the 5th year for this symposium. It started in 2021, soon after I arrived at Hofstra, when I wanted to understand the schools and colleges here and what made them tick. So I asked that faculty from the schools put on panels that talked about their own academic programs and what they were most proud of. This turned out to be a great way to kick off the academic year, so we made it an annual event. In 2022, we did sustainability. In 2023, the panels were about artificial intelligence in higher education. And in 2024, the topic was higher education in an election year. This year, amid all the disruption and uncertainty that is swirling around higher education over the past few months, we decided to do something totally different and ask the faculty to go back to basics, to think in effect about why they chose the academic life to begin with. We charged them to explore and share something about the beauty that they have found in their disciplines. There must be something of a beauty that inspires a faculty member to build a career around studying and teaching engineering or journalism, business or history. Where is the beauty in these disciplines, the thing that drew them in, that continues to inspire their work, and that animates the questions they ask and the knowledge that they seek? And more than faculty got involved in this year's symposium. Hopefully you all noticed in the entryway just outside there were posters displayed. These were all done by students under the direction of Professor Jim Lee as part of their reflection on this symposium theme. After the symposium, the posters will be displayed in the student gallery in Calkins Hall. So before we begin, I will remind you that the keynote speech by the really magnificent artist, Janet Eckelman, is at 11 o'clock this morning in this room, just following the first symposium panel by the DeMatteis School of Engineering and Applied Science. So let's begin with that, the beauty of trust, building intelligent and secure systems. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the first session of the 2025 Presidential Symposium, The Beauty of. Today's presentation is by the Fred DeMatteis School of Engineering and Applied Science. It's called The Beauty of Trust, Building Intelligent and Secure Systems. This panel brings together faculty to explore the art of designing systems that are secure, reliable, and aligned with human values, from secure cloud infrastructure and cyber physical systems to AI safety, privacy preserving design, and AI-driven approaches to system security. Each panelist will share their perspectives on how we build trust into the digital systems that shape our lives. Please welcome our moderator for today's panel, Professor of Computer Science, Krish.
Are we going to sit here?
Like after the presentation.
presentation will be on the screen, and then if you'd like to lift. Yeah.
All right, thanks. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, The Beauty of Trust, Building Intelligent and Secure Systems. At its heart, this year's symposium asks us to reflect on the beauty within our disciplines, the spark that drew us in at first, the inspirations that keep us going, and the human values that drive what we do. John Keats wrote, beauty is beauty is truth, beauty. He didn't talk about trust, but trust follows truth. Today, we'll see what it means to have trust in computer science, especially in designing systems that are intelligent, secure, and worthy of trust. Here at Hofstra, AI, security, and trust are at the heart of not just what we do as research, but also what we teach in our undergraduate and graduate programs. We offer undergraduate and graduate programs in cybersecurity, and we have undergraduate and graduate concentrations in artificial intelligence, and we have a strong community of faculty and students who are deeply engaged in these disciplines. We are fortunate that we have immense support from the upper administration for the infrastructure that's needed to support study in these areas. Together, our faculty and students work on questions that touch on everything from cloud systems and formal guarantees to AI safety, AI privacy, and how you can build secure infrastructures. We can begin today's panel discussion with an introduction to our newest faculty member, Professor Shan, and then broaden from there to talk about issues that pervade the design of large systems and especially intelligent systems. Professor Shan has research that spans both defensive and offensive security, from adaptive intrusion testing to evaluating endpoint defenses to developing automated penetration testing systems powered by AI, by large language models. His work shows that trust in systems comes not only from building strong defenses, but also from rigorously testing and challenging them. Let's hear it from Professor Shan.
And thank you for the warm introduction, Krish. And good morning, everyone. It's my honor to be here and give you this opening presentation on our today's session of Beauty of the Trust. So a little about me. I'm a new faculty that recently joined Hofstra. It's my third week here, and I'm very excited to see the beautiful campus and the student body here. So let me start. Our everyday life runs on digital trust. Our medical record, we do online banking. We have smart home devices. We use chatbot recently with the advancement in OpenAI's ChatGPT and others, LLM. But imagine what happens when those trust breaks. We have ransomware that some attacker come in and lock up all your files and ask you for ransom. We have deepfake that mimic to be another person and do some bad stuff. We also have all kinds of misinformation, fake news, and such that generated by AI and spreading on media. So we've witnessed that although the advancement of AI has brought us a lot of advancement and some daily life convenience, at the same time, they're bringing a lot of challenges in security. They have expanded the attack surface, and they have introduced new form of cybercrime. For example, we have new phishing techniques that can mimic someone's tone, even voice, or even his face. We have the AI has advanced the development of malware and ransomware to a much faster speed. Under such circumstance, the traditional defenses struggle because traditionally we use static rules to detect threats, and those static rules cannot match the adaptive attacker that is evolving every day. And also, traditional defense rely on manual monitoring by a human, which is usually very slow and time-consuming. And overall, the complexity of what's going on out there outpaces human oversight. At the same time, let's take a look at the security landscape right now. On the left-hand side, you can see the security market is growing so rapidly. And at the left bottom corner, you can see the AI has been playing a more and more important role in cybersecurity with a very rapid growth. But at the same time, as we can see on the right-hand side, we are seeing more and more vulnerabilities every year. Last year alone, we witnessed over 40,000 of new vulnerabilities that's being published. And at the same time, we see there's a lot of reported burnout or alarm fatigue that's happening among the security teams. And which ironically give us this trust paradox in security. Nowadays, with all those advancements in technology, we are building increasingly complex security systems to help protect us against threats. But at the same time, those systems are often too complicated for those practitioners to understand or trust. So as a result, every security practitioner will struggle to trust their own tools. And this brings me to my research vision. My goal in my research is to develop systems that explain their intelligence, not hide it. And I approach it in a two-folded ways. So first of all, I want to make sure that our system understands security, right? So we can keep up with the evolving threats. So AI will be a very helpful tool in this aspect. And at the same time, we want to help humans understand the output of the security tools. So they have very clear reasoning when they're making their security decisions. And brings them together, our goal is we want the security systems work like your most trusted advisor. They're brilliant, reliable, and always willing to explain their thinking. So let me introduce two scenarios under which I've developed some novel tools to advance security in both offense and defense. So the first scenario is in a defense scenario, which we need to perform some intrusion detection. So the challenge in intrusion detection is we often face this dilemma that we have to choose between either a fast but rigid rule-based system that explains itself well, but at the same time, you have to manually adjust the rules and the rules don't evolve themselves. On the other hand, we also have this accurate but more opaque machine learning approach that we can utilize machine learning's data-driven capability to learn from environments, but at the same time, they are a black box. They often fail to explain themselves. So naturally, our question is it possible that we maintain the lightweight and efficiency and explainability of the rule-based system while enabling the learning? And our intuition comes from this very this analogy. So we want to develop a model that learns rules, right? This is very similar to what you will learn in your machine learning 101 when you are introduced the gradient descent algorithm. So when you are doing gradient-based parameter learning, you will initialize some parameters and you feed it some training data, and you calculate your loss and update weights. Similarly, we want to do the same for the under detection task and update the rules. So I'm not trying to present all the tech details, but this is actually a very beautiful analog that enable us to learn rules with real environments while keeping all the benefits the rules-based system offered. So as a result, our system has achieved 90% reduction in false alarm while maintaining our detection accuracy. And its impact, real-world impact is the security analysts using our system can see exactly why decisions are made because we have the rule semantics with the rules to explain the output, while we still have accurate, lightweighted system. So let me talk about a little bit on the offense side as well. And this is also what I'm recently researching, the penetration testing and how do we do it better. So the challenge in traditional penetration testing is it requires a lot of expertise and it's very labor intensive. At least you have to do these 3 stages. You have to gather information from your target, and you need to do some analysis on where should I begin with, what are my like attack surface, attack points, and then you do the exploitation. So each of that stage requires a lot of an analysis of different kinds of data sources. For example, you need to analyze the reconnaissance result to identify where should I begin my attack. And you need to go through some vulnerability reports, exploitation database to choose your like target and choose your tools to do it. And you need to go through a lot of different documents, code repository, all kinds of heterogeneous data sources. And traditionally, it's not possible to do it automatically. And now with the advancement of AI, we were able to build a multi-agent system that we assign each agent a specific role as if they're in a real-world red team. And they can work together to carry out this complicated task that usually requires a lot of human efforts and expertise. Also, without going too much into the tech details, I will just show the outcome of our system. So our system is one of the first end-to-end automated penetration testing systems that achieved 74 automated end-to-end success rate on real-world vulnerable environments, which is 3 times better than previous work. And why that matters in real life is our work can democratize the expert level penetration testing so that small companies who are used to, there's no way for them to afford such large expertise required penetration testing can do that in their own company. So a few takeaways from those 2 projects I've done. I want to make sure that the transparency and adaptability are there for the security system and for the human there using it. It's always more important to put the human at the center. We don't want to completely replace human effort in security field. We want to augment their capability of doing something better. And it's always very important to give some evidence-based decision making so that people understand what's going on. And to facilitate our later discussion in our panel, I want to bring up that what I've talked about is just a very small piece in the security, in the system security. There are a lot of more aspects that requires trust. For example, when we are doing all kinds of stuff on cloud system, we need a secure infrastructure. We want privacy preserving design in basically every system. When we're using AI, we're also concerned with how AI can be a safe tool for us to use. And also, you've seen like Tesla and all kinds of IoT devices out there. The cyber physical system reliability is also a very important aspect that we need to consider. So that concludes my opening presentation, and looking forward to a very wonderful panel discussion.
Thank you, Professor Shan, for a beautiful melding of both AI and security. The panel will now go into discussion. All right. Thank you, Professor Shan. That was a great talk introducing your work. To start, I'd like to ask each of the panelists here to introduce themselves and tell us where you first found beauty in your work related to trust. Was there a moment or an idea that sparked your journey into this field? And let's start with Professor Gu here.
Yes, my research addresses real-time embedded systems and safety-critical cyber-physical systems, such as autonomous vehicles with stringent requirements on safety, security, efficiency, and timeliness. So my research addresses really more safety than security. But these two aspects are closely intertwined, as malicious attacks that compromise security can also compromise safety in the safety critical system. And both safety and security are central pillars of trust. So in fact, safety and security are the same word in Chinese, 安全. So that's my perspective.
Professor Romanelli?
Hi, I'm Professor Romanelli from the Computer Science Department. I joined about a year ago, and my research, if I can summarize it in three main questions, is about the following 3 points. Can we trust a machine learning model? If so, to what extent? And finally, what statistical tools we can use to bound error in automatic prediction or information leakage from a perspective of privacy and security. And something that is a bit of an anecdote is like what I find beautiful in these type of problems is that you cannot look at trust and security as an attribute of machine learning, more so as a trade-off that appears every day. Why? Because if we had a perfectly secure system where no secret information is released at any time, there wouldn't be any learning. So for learning and security to coexist, we need to find a trade-off where, like as in our day-to-day life, we find a compromise between what we want to share in order to have some learning, and what we want to protect so that the learning does not create any problem for the security of the systems that we work on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jianchen Shan. I'm a faculty member in computer science. My general research interest is in computer system, especially large-scale system. So recently, my effort is paid on the cloud system. So I hope my work can make the system faster, at the same time being secure. So for my original story, it goes way back to when I was a student back in Shanghai. I remember I was involved in a project when I get a chance to access to a very large supercomputer, and I was amazed by the massive computing power from the computer. At that time, I think it's ranked top 100 in the world. I was very fortunate to be able to work on the system, to understand that how people can design a system to fully maximize the resource, reduce the energy consumption, at the same time allow the many users, hundreds of users across the campus to use the system in a safe way. So that's what motivated me to enter this area. But I also want to mention that at Hofstra, in our department, if you go to the Science and Innovation Center, we also have a little and mighty data center in our facility. It actually has hundreds of GPU cores, and it offer a massive computing power for our students to use in their study and research. I hope more students can be attracted and more original story will be written by our students here or have been written here. So that's my story. Yeah.
Okay, hello again. My name is Shan. So my area, as I just presented, is on system security and also AI for security. And I've been studying the defensive side and offensive side. So my first exposure to security is my junior year summer. I participated in a DARPA Transparent Computing campaign, which is kind of red team and blue team campaign organized by DARPA. And we are on actually the blue team. So they hire some professional like red team to attack. And we as a blue team will collect data and analyze the data to report threats at real time. And they evaluate us on that. And I was very non-experienced undergrad at that time, but I'm really attracted to this experience, and which motivated me to pursue a PhD in computer science and specifically in security. Yeah, that's how things started.
Thank you for the introductions. I'd like to begin this part of the discussion by asking you to raise your hand if you've ever experienced this situation. You have a system that you trust, and it failed unexpectedly. It's a system that you rely on, that you trust that it works, and that it failed unexpectedly. How many of you have experienced this situation? I expect the vast majority of you have had this happen to you. Well, what we're going to do is to look at motivating examples. We're going to find out why this happens and how we can fix it. Right? So we've all felt a moment when a system that we relied on let us down. To set the stage, I'd like our panelists to discuss why trust is so critical in their work and some examples of where trust fell short of expectations. Professor Gu? Or in any order? Marco, you can go ahead.
I can go ahead. I would like to ask you to think for a little bit. Imagine the OpenAI ChatGPT page. Try to think about it in your head and try to see if you can remember what you can read at the very bottom of the page. Does anybody? Yes.
It's experimental AI may not be accurate.
Yeah, there's also a teeny tiny disclaimer. Yeah.
I was like thinking it's something along the line. I was thinking it's something along the lines of like AI is not 100% accurate. Please double check its response.
Correctly. Yeah. that's exactly what I was hinting at. So that's something that is a flaw of pretty much every large-scale machine learning model that we use in our day-to-day life. These models are trained and are expected to always infer an output, and they're not very good, if they're good at all, at detecting when they're wrong, saying that they're wrong, and explaining why they're wrong. So like the work of my last 2 years is actually dedicated to trying to find and automate systems that can detect errors, both in classification, but also in generation and regression. And I think that this is very important. The more AI becomes ubiquitous in our life, it's very important to have some sort of like self-check mechanism in place. And like what I find particularly challenging is that even if you find something that makes sense and is theoretically grounded, it's very, very hard to explain it to people. It's very, very hard to convince non-technical people that even being able to reject a small proportion of wrong answers or wrong completions is actually a great achievement. So I think that that's probably the weakest point that I can spot from my perspective in modern AI, and that's why I find it very exciting to work on that.
Professor Shan?
Oh yeah, I can go. In my research area, I just explained that I work in the cloud system, right? I think most of you heard about cloud, right? And most of our service are hosted on the cloud. Most of the data is actually on the cloud. For example, personally, we may use iCloud, Dropbox, or such service, right? And also storage service, or maybe after you finish your work or study, you go home, watch Netflix, those streaming services are actually hosted on the cloud, right? So it's very important that the security is reinforced in the cloud. So in the cloud, but in the cloud, there could be many problems. I could share with you some examples. One of the problems I work on is the virtual machine. We know that the virtual machine is a building block in the cloud. So what is a virtual machine? Let me give you a little bit background. So virtual machine is a software entity. Basically, let's say you have a physical server, right? You can simulate a lot of little computer, they call virtual machine, and different users can run different operating systems. Some people can run Windows, some people can run Linux. They can then share the physical resource to reduce the energy consumption. From the cloud provider perspective, they can get more revenue, right? Because every virtual machine needs to be rented out, right? In this case, normally every virtual machine in the cloud, they can be rented out to run some web service, store your data, and normally they work with the host. Normally we call those virtual machines as the tenant. Every virtual machine is tenant A, tenant B, tenant C, right? And the physical server they are hosted on is called a host. So normally the host, they work with the tenant. They trust each other. For example, one day maybe one tenant say, I'm gonna need a very powerful tool to be used in my apartment, and could you have a schedule, every other tenant in the building allow me to use it, right? So normally this is done in a cooperative way to maximize the resource and satisfy the performance request for every single tenant. But what if your host is compromised? There's a big problem, right? It's very possible. Let's say imagine that the host is similar to let's say imagine this is in your apartment building. You are renting an apartment building, and your landlord is compromised. Landlord has the key to everybody's room, right? Then the whole apartment is compromised. Even worse, in the cloud, it's possible that you may have some malicious neighbor. You may say, okay, the neighbor doesn't have the key to your apartment, doesn't have access to some sensitive data you have, right? But actually, there are different ways they can actually do that. For example, one of the recent work I'm studying is called side channel attack. What they do is they can actually silently steal the information from one virtual machine to another virtual machine. So they use some sort of microarchitecture they share between a virtual machine to do that. But without going into detail, I can give you an example. Let's say you have a malicious neighbor live next to your room, right? What they can do is they can analyze the vibration of the wall to recover the speech you have in your room. kind of to hear what you are saying in your room. It's possible, right? And similarly in the cloud, one of the resources they share is called cache. So if another user, another tenant running another virtual machine, right? If they are browse some website, they may leave some trace in your cache, and then other tenants can see the activity from your cache trace. Then they can understand what website they're accessing. Then your privacy gets violated, right? So so basically, my research is trying to achieve high performance in those cloud infrastructure. At the same time, make sure that such security issue can be prevented as much as possible. So this is the problem I'm facing in the cloud system area.
Professor Gu, can you talk about something related to self-driving cars and trust in them?
Yeah, so for electronic systems in a vehicle, before the deep learning revolution, the algorithms are relatively simple and can be extensively tested or verified to ensure safety. But things all changed since AI models became widely deployed in the car, or more recently, large language models or multimodal vision language models. They are being used for autonomous driving. So these models are so large that it's impossible to perform exhaustive testing like before. You have to develop alternative techniques such as runtime monitoring and other methods. So for example, AI models are known to make mistakes for so-called out-of-distribution inputs due to natural scene variations such as heavy snow or fog, or it can be due to malicious attacks to the input image. For example, you can place a sticker on a stop sign to mislead the neural network into misclassifying into a speed limit sign. All of these safety hazards have huge implications in safety, because if ChatGPT makes a mistake when you're writing an essay, you just get a low score. But if it makes a mistake during autonomous driving, it can cause severe consequences. So it's a wide open research area. Basically, no one knows how to do it. Industry relies on longer and more extensive testing for more and more data, but there is no silver bullet on this topic. It's just so new that you're applying such large models in the safety critical system.
So we see why trust is so important in self-driving cars, in virtual machine, which is what Amazon sells, cloud infrastructure, and all those other kinds of things in building intelligent machine learning models. So we see trust is important, but how do we build trust? And so that's the critical piece, and that's basically what Professor Gu has been saying, that it's hard to build trust into these really complex systems, but we need to start somewhere. We need to start attacking the problem, and we'll talk about not just what the problem is, but how our panelists deal with these issues. What's their approach? So once again, I'd like to ask Professor Romanelli to talk about how to build trust into these systems that we use on a daily basis.
Yeah, so I guess when it comes to this question, I'm a bit of a hardliner. I, of course, work in modern machine learning where having experimental evidence or like specific application to specific cases is what makes your model easy to sell, what creates the hype. But for me, everything comes down to what you can show through equations. Like most of my work is actually focused on finding mathematical evidence of trustworthiness, which means you have to sort of like create a levy to privacy leakage or error probability. So everything that me and like my community at large are trying to do is to try to communicate with the the average user that it's always a matter of a trade-off. There's nothing that can be completely secure because, as I said before, if something is completely secure, there's not gonna be any learning. But what you would like to to be sure of when you use one of these models is that the probability of any malfunctioning or any harm hitting you is very minimal. And in order to do this, we have like two main huge paradigms that are they usually you have for a few years. One is more hype than the other, and then they switch, which are the two main cases that we consider. One is what we call average case, and one is what we call worst case. And basically what we try to do in these two scenarios is, in one case, we're trying to guarantee that on average, the probability of getting some harm from using a model is almost non-existing for the average. In the other case, we consider the strongest possible attack. And while the second case is, so the worst case scenario is much stronger and it provides the guarantees that allow you to use something without a shadow of a doubt, it's also true that it's the hardest to communicate to the average user, because most of the times the results that we get are very pessimistic. And I think that's the main struggle that I and my community and I find in communicating with the average user when people want to use these large models.
Professor Shan, what tools and mechanisms do you use to build trust into cloud infrastructure? All of our administrative systems are run in the cloud. So how do we trust the cloud? How do you build tools to trust cloud-based systems?
Okay, great. Thanks for the question. I would say in computer system, majority of the security issues are coming from either software or hardware, right? But it's possible that, in my personal opinion, most of the issues are coming from the hardware. Sometimes there's no good way to do it. Sometimes you have to just disable it. For example, if there are any vulnerability in hardware, in the new hardware that's causing any system security issue, we have to update our operating system to patch it, to disable it. But sometimes, if you are able to advance the hardware to fully address that issue without compromising the performance, like the trade-off Marco mentioned, it's very hard because hardware doesn't evolve quickly, right? Manufacture, design, everything takes time. So, but luckily in my area, in the cloud system, there is a breakthrough technique which is called confidential computing. So I don't know if any of you heard about that. Basically, guess what? Confidential computing is built on top of confidential virtual machine. So the way they do it is the hardware vendor provide a possibility that for you to run your virtual machine in the cloud and run your service, store your data in a safe manner without letting the host to access your data. So in that case, we're assuming that the user running those virtual machine, a cloud virtual machine, they don't trust the hypervisor, nor they don't trust the other tenants. So the new hardware advance allow them to actually block the host from looking at the data belong to the tenant. So it's completely safe. And even better, what that confidential virtual machine does is it will not allow the host cloud provider or something called hypervisor that is used to create a virtual machine to actually look at the status of anything. For example, the CPU resource, the cache resource, the memory resource used by the virtual machine. Everything is completely enclaved. So in that case, it provides perfect safety with the advance in hardware. But what is my job? My job is this type of confidential virtual machine comes with a cost. Later, I will explain more. But basically, it makes things slower. So how can we make things faster again in those confidential virtual machine? without, at the same time, maintain the security is still an open question, and people are still work on the problem. So I would say this is still an ongoing effort, but the major tool that I think the next generation cloud system will build on top of the confidential virtual machine. Yeah, that's what we are doing in Hofstra to research on that. Yeah, thank you.
Professor Shan, you mentioned this contradiction between more complex tools to address complex security issues and the fact that practitioners cannot trust their own tools because they are so complex. So what mechanisms do you employ so that practitioners have more trust in their own tools?
Okay, I can talk about that. Just give you a little bit more background on like why this is a problem. We've been working with security operating center like analysts, and we learned that each of them have to deal with hundreds, even thousands of alarms every day. It's not possible for them to like take a root cause analysis of each single one of them and determine if this is a real alarm or a false alarm, right? Then in this case, trust is really important. Like you cannot just trust every single one of them. It's better that you are given like a subset of them than with more like confidence for you to take a look at. So like my effort in part is, first of all, I want to reduce the number of alarms, mainly the false alarms, with our like intelligence system. And at the same time, with the rest of the alarm that actually got reported, we want to provide more detailed explanation of why does the system think this is an alarm, and to help them make quick decisions.
So the idea is to give better explanations for what set off that alarm, so that to kind of work out the background behind that alarm. Thank you, Professor Shan. So Professor Gu, I'm going to move to the next topic here. Of course, building trust is never free, and one of the things that Dr. Shan mentioned is when you make systems more trustworthy, they become slower. It's like in many situations, when you build a more secure lock, it tends to be heavier and it costs more and takes more time to even lock and unlock. Right? Those things take more time. So trust is never free, and every safeguard has a cost. So let's talk about these trade-offs. Right? So what do we gain? Well, we gain trust, but what could we lose in the process of gaining trust? Because trust is something that you have to pay for. So Professor Gu, what's the trade-off in autonomous systems? In autonomous self-driving cars, and when you gain trust, what do you lose, or what would you how would you lose trust by gaining something else instead? So how do we balance trade-off with some other cost excuse me, in autonomous self-driving cars?
Yeah, there's always trade-offs between computational efficiency and model performance. So, for example, you can use model compression techniques to reduce model size and complexity, but it comes at the cost of reduced level of performance. For example, the same input may be out of distribution for a small, simple neural network, but it may not be for a large, complex neural network, which is well-trained on all kinds of corner cases. And also another common method for enhancing safety and trust is to use ensembling. That is, you run multiple models, diverse models in parallel, and let them vote. And that can help really ensure safety, because it's very unlikely for all the models to make the same mistake at the same time for the same input, but that triples, oftentimes doubles and triples your computational cost. So especially for resource-constrained embedded platforms, such as the computing system in the car, you cannot afford very heavy and lots of redundancy in computation. So there's always this trade-off that the designer has to make.
So would you say that both cost and response times can increase when you try to build in more trust? There's cost as in more additional hardware, additional systems that you need to support, and also the time it takes to actually infer, to figure out if something is dangerous or safe. So those are both costs that you pay, right, for increasing trust.
Yeah, especially for real-time systems that interact with the physical world in a continuous manner. Timing is often as important as correctness. For example, if your object recognition algorithm is very slow, but it's very accurate, it may not be very useful to you because by the time you recognize that's a pedestrian, that's a car, maybe it's too late to avoid that collision. So sometimes a fast yet but not so accurate algorithm may be preferred than a slow but very accurate algorithm.
Right. Professor Romanelli, you mentioned that this balance between trust on one hand and other considerations is something that interests you a lot.
Yeah.
So would you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah,
about how you look at balance?
Yeah, I mean, and actually I can connect to what Professor Gu just mentioned. Like, as a follow-up, one of the main problems, especially when you try to deploy error detection techniques in real-world scenarios, the amount of data that you need. And there's a inherent problem in machine learning is that if you open a standard paper, even from a top conference, what you see is that new systems come out every day and they all somehow perform better than the system that came out a week ago. But the truth is that the evaluation is done on benchmarks that are sort of recognized as important by the community, but they're very limited. When you look into the data that is used most of the time, these data points are extremely well curated, extremely well fit for the specific application. So in a way, yes, new system, new ideas work, but only when you deploy them in a very controlled scenario. Actually, something that me and some people I work with we recently published is this paper where we showed that even if we use MNIST is like for those that are not aware of what's going on in machine learning, was like all the hype maybe 10 years ago, is a very tiny data set with just like less than 100,000 images, and where the images don't even reach 1,000 pixels. So it's very, very small. One could think that it's easy to curate, it's easy to do every kind of check on these small images. And the truth is that even a simple attack like the one that Professor Gu was mentioning, putting a sticker, like a post-it on one of these images to generate misclassification is extremely simple for the attacker. And being able to defend from the most powerful attacker, which is the one that knows the full data set, is nearly impossible, statistically speaking. So even something that looks so trivial and so simple, it actually is not if you want to have strong guarantees.
Professor Shan, so what are the trade-offs that you consider when you mentioned time as being a factor? That is, if you want to build more secure systems, they are inherently going to be slow.
Yes.
Are there other things? Does gaining trust means, well, it means losing time, right? You get more trustworthy systems, but are there other trade-offs as well? So what else do you have to give up in order to gain trust?
I think a lot in the operating system design. I'm mostly working in operating system, and I tell my students in the class, every design you learn in my class is a trade-off in the system, to trade off between the security and fairness, trade-off between the performance and security. So it's always a trade-off between different things and jiggle around between them. One of the example, I think it's related to everyone. For example, whenever you purchase a laptop or computer, right, normally tell you, oh, I have 24 cores. Normally those 24 cores, it translates to 12 cores using something called a hyperthreading. And I don't know if you heard about hyperthreading. Hyperthreading is a technique to simulate one core to two logical core so that you can virtually have more cores to use, right? But actually, unfortunately, in the cloud, most time this is disabled. Why? Because people find if you allow the two users running their virtual machine again on the same server, right? And if they happen to run on two hyper-threaded that share the same physical core, then it's very easy to steal the information because they share something called a private cache. So most of the time, fortunately, they have to disable it. So this really creates a reduction in the flexibility that the cloud provider cannot easily schedule their task on such powerful hardware, right? And to me, it's pretty bad, but especially they even develop some sort of scheduling. I teach scheduling in my class, and I tell them that they especially develop some scheduler algorithm to make sure that a different user doesn't use the same hyperthreads that host on the same physical core. This is one of the example I can share. But I also want to say that the system developer, system engineer, when they develop a safe and secure operating system, they find their ways. They always find a scenario where we actually doesn't require high level of security, such that we can get opportunity to take advantage of the performance in such case. So for example, in one of the work I did, we find that that's actually the work we did this year. I think most of you heard about microservice, right? Microservice, another name is service computing. They run a bunch of container in the virtual machine in the cloud, and we find that okay, most of the time it's actually single user, meaning in those cloud instance or virtual machine, they're actually on the running the microservice belong to the same user or same organization, right? So in this case, probably we don't need to enforce those security layer we put in place in the first place. For example, to create security boundary between the service belong to the same user, what we did is we simply get rid of it. I mean, this case, it sounds risky, but we safely make sure that in this scenario, we don't need a strong isolation between the user in the cloud. So in this case, we can simply get rid of it. So this is one example. So I think trade-off is everywhere in the system. Another example is if your system is single user, right? Sometimes I think the next trend in the cloud is use a new operating system called a unikernel. So I think everyone uses operating system, right? For example, you may use Windows, Linux, Mac OS, Android in your phone, right? You all use operating system. And operating system, I teach in my class, I tell my student one of the roles is create a restricted access to the hardware, right? But we find that in those cloud instances, when you only have one user, you don't have to have that. So the cloud, those operating systems only need to serve one purpose as a library. All they need to do is provide some access to the hardware. They don't need to heavily loaded with the functionality that create a security boundary between a service. So sometimes we call them unikernel, sometimes we call them library OS. So this is also another, I personally believe is a very important development in the cloud. That is actually going another way from the confidential virtual machine I mentioned before. Instead of making things very heavy, what they do is make things very light, because they find a scenario when you don't need security that much, right? So you cannot get the best of the two worlds. So you have to find the best case that you can work with. For example, if you really have very high security standard, then use a confidential virtual machine. If not, you can use unikernel, library OS. So this is the trade-off I always teach in my class regarding the cloud system and operating system.
Yeah. In cybersecurity, Professor Shan, what are the trade-offs? So, I mean, again, cybersecurity is built on trust. Is there even a concept of trade-off? Can you trade trust for something else? Isn't trust paramount in cybersecurity?
To me, I will speak from more like when I design like a defense system or to detect threats. The trade-off I will think about, if of course we will cover like efficiency and effectiveness, right? If you want to do a quick detection of the threats, sometimes you don't have that much time to process all the information. Then you are presented with limited information, but you still need to make a decision. And I mean, it's not possible that under such circumstances you can make a super accurate decision. But sometimes you do need to make that like trade-offs. And when I think of trade-offs when I design a system, I will more describe it as customization, because under some circumstances you do need that fast react. And under certain circumstances, you want to do some forensics. You want to do understand the scenario as much as possible. Then you are willing to devote more time in this scenario. Then you can do the trade-off that invest more time and get more accurate result. So when I design a system, I will always give this as an option to the users. We do that by hyperparameters, right? They can set customized threshold, customized weights in the system, so that they can really customize the system to fit their needs in different scenarios. And but yeah, I mean, trade-offs always exist. There's no perfect world that everything is like 100%
secure. That's true. All right. So, I mean, so far we've spoken about the complex systems that you all deal with, and things are only getting further complex down the line. Especially with large language models and other kinds of intelligent systems. Looking forward, what might we anticipate are future challenges? What are the upcoming challenges, right? So, are there limits that we need to place on ourselves on what to expect in the future? So what are these automation, AI based challenges that we can anticipate having to deal with in the future? Professor Go.
AI and machine learning are really the enabling technology for today's autonomous systems, including autonomous vehicles and robots. Before AI, you use the simple algorithms that can be verified, but it just don't work well. So after the deep learning revolution, the accuracy of object recognition and detection and tracking became so good that they really enabled the rapid advancement in autonomous driving and robots. In recent years, the advancements in large language models and large vision and language models are really driving the next generation autonomous systems. So in that they can deal with corner cases, which have very limited training data, which were really the main cause of the errors and mistakes of traditional deep learning, because these large models have so much pre-training and so much knowledge built in just before being applied to any specific application domain. So they can naturally deal with these very rare corner cases even without seeing them before. So that's a huge win for ensuring the system safety. But it's a double-edged sword in that they have human-level intelligence at the same time. They are so complex that it's beyond the today's verification validation techniques, and they hallucinate. And there are some recent works of playing some guardrails on the outputs, but in general, it's a huge beast that's both powerful and useful and also dangerous.
So I just want to follow up on that. there's this question of alignment. Is that something, any of you can explain what alignment means and how alignment yields trust? Is this something any of you can speak to?
Yeah, alignment means that you align the model's behavior with human preferences. So essentially, during training, you give the output to humans, that humans give a thumbs up or thumbs down for their responses to make them more aligned with the human preferences. So that's obviously a key technique in model training.
To build trust.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Professor Romanelli, in your work, in working with differential privacy and those related technologies, how can we see them employed in the future? So where would we expect to see them compared to what's being done now?
Yes. Well, so first of all, great question. I know that we discussed this before. Especially there is this famous case of Apple that uses a parameter whose value for privacy is is quite questionable. But I guess like what I think that the main frontier, what we would see, the deployment of these techniques, but also an issue, especially in the world we live in, which is an academic world, is that at some point we will have to face dichotomy between awareness and passive use. I think even before we create a culture where we try to be upfront and deploy all these techniques, I think it comes down to each and every one of us to be able to be critical thinkers and not just passive users. So I see a lot of hype on using these models in a quite indiscriminate way. It becomes harder and harder for people not to be dependent, and I think that's possibly the next frontier that we should all deal with.
So it's basically up to us consumers being more aware of what's being sold to us as trustworthy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Professor Shan, so in a few minutes, if you could describe what's for your future as a researcher in cloud infrastructure.
Okay, great. So I would like to share my work. So intelligence to me is a great helper in system design. Actually, at Hofstra, we're developing an operating system called a cloud operating system called Octopus OS. It's the first ever cloud operating system that can adapt to the virtualized resource in the cloud. So the way it works is we try to develop a lot of probers, and kind of like the octopus arm, it can adapt to the environment, it can sense what is going on in the cloud, in the host, and be able to understand what is happening on other tenant, on other virtual machine, what is provided, what resource is available, what is the contention, how bad the resource is contended. So what we do is our student team actually develop a bunch of probers and to smartly detect the resource that is available to each cloud instance we are currently renting, and then be able to fully maximize the utilization of those resources. I think this is really our way to use intelligence in a system, but more importantly, I want to let you be aware that this system totally doesn't need any help from the cloud provider, doesn't need any hardware support, meaning we can achieve the optimization without waiting any new hardware, without waiting any hypervisor update in the cloud. We basically allow the user to run our cloud operating system, hit the ground and run, get the performance improvement. So I think this is really a use case that allowed us to gain the performance, gain the security, high level of security using the intelligence. Especially this method is, I don't know if you realize, it fit the confidential computing very well. Because as I mentioned before, right, for those confidential cloud virtual machine, right, and they don't trust the host, so they don't let the host to look at their data, and they don't let the host to examine the status of their, for example, the CPU, virtual CPU, and in that case, there's no cooperation between the host and the tenants, right? What we do is simply from the tenant perspective, we smartly understand what is going on the host to maximize the utilization. So I think this will really, our goal is to create a revolution in the next generation of the confidential computing with the high performance.
So for the most part, now we have spoken about the research that our panelists do in this area of trust. For the next couple of minutes, I'd like for, especially for Professor Romanelli and Professor Shan, to talk about how our students are involved in getting them. Yes, I see we're almost running out of time. So if you can give us a quick overview of how what we teach and how our students are involved in this effort to build trustworthy systems.
Yeah, I can be very brief. Actually, the research that I do deeply influences what I teach. I just recently proposed last semester a course on cybersecurity for AI and machine learning, which tackles many of these issues that we mentioned today. And I'm looking forward to next semester where my new course on cryptography will, kickstart. And I'm very excited about it because once again, is a course that goes, down to the very basics of what security is. And indeed, one of the most exciting notions that I hope the students will appreciate is the concept of statistical perfect security, which is due to Shannon, Claude Shannon, one of my idols from the Bell Labs. And so I'm looking forward to it.
Professor Shan, if you could briefly touch upon programs that we offer in security.
Sure. So in our department, we actually have two programs. One is the BS in cybersecurity, one is the MS in cybersecurity. Especially the Master in cybersecurity, we recently redesigned it. And in this program, we incorporate more technical depth in the cybersecurity program, really offer our students to study, for example, offensive and defensive technique, cryptography from Marco, and also network security from Gu. So I think we welcome our students to consider our program because you will get the world-class training and to work as a cybersecurity professionals.
Thank you, everyone. I'd now like to open it up to the audience and to see what perspectives you have, what questions you may have for our panelists, especially as we see this big intersection of intelligence in the form of AI and LLMs and security, an all-pervasive issue that we need to address, in order to build trust. Any questions that the audience may have for our panel members? Somebody has a question.
If you don't have a question, can you please go to the mic so we can get it on the recordings? Thank you.
I always listen to Athleen. So thanks, great conversation, great discussion. I was really taken by the back and forth around choice and trade-offs. And so the question really becomes, whose voices are involved in that decision-making? So, it's been talked frequently now that there are really 7 companies, 7 men that are making all of the generative AI decisions around the world. So I guess the question is, what role, if any, do you think state governments and regulatory bodies can and should play in providing a framework around the trade-offs?
Does anyone want to address that? It's a tough challenge, I think. I will give you my perspective on this. And I don't work directly in the area of trust, but I am conversant with many of those issues that you brought up. And the challenge is manifold, not just that it's that this concentration of the determination of direction in these 7 companies. And it's not just US companies, it's a global phenomenon. Now, you may build regulations to control what's being done in the US, but that doesn't necessarily apply across the world, across the board. There are going to be players in all manner of countries, in the east, west, north, south, building their own. So there needs to be, eventually, a collective sort of demand from the people of their governments to find ways to address trust issues. Because basically, it's not going to come from the top down. I think it's eventually going to be the consumers, the citizens of pretty much every country is going to have to demand of their representatives a way to protect their interests and forming trustworthy AI. And I believe that it's the profit motive, and I'm a capitalist, but the profit motive overrides everything. And I think in some situations, it's got to come from the consumer side and not from the producers. So that's the best I can say, is that it's not going to come inherently from the big shots. It's going to come from the little folk. Okay? Hope that I...
Thank you for the wonderful presentation and showing the depth and breadth of the faculty in the DeMatteis School. So as you know, we are in midst of implementing strategic plans for our schools and for university. And they are external objectives or urgencies which are impacting how we are implementing these things. Like we talk about the cliff and other things. So I think you presented a very convincing presentation that addressing trust is a strategic urgency for implementation of AI. So to take that further, I want to pose the question that if we don't take care of this, what's going to be the extent of reputational damage that your expertise and your field would experience, and how we could prevent that from happening? As you know, in 1980s, we promised AI, but we couldn't deliver on it. So now, finally, in 2023, we are promising it, and because of computational power, we are hoping to deliver it. But what is because of this urgency, what challenges you are most concerned about?
I say I don't want to handle that. I don't want to be the only one yakking here.
I can
Please.
talk a little bit. So yeah, I've been actively following the advancement in AI for security. I know DARPA has hosted AIXCC challenges that brings teams together to develop agents that, without any human intervention, that detects vulnerabilities and fix vulnerabilities. And I do see a lot of potentials in those. But at the same time, my concern is how do we balance those automated AI agent and human agency? Like if you just want to develop everything without human intervention, and who's the one that's governing them? And what if things go wrong? And I don't think they are at least disclosing any aspect on how they take care of that. That's would be my concern. Although, as a scientist point of view, I want to develop the most powerful AI agent. That AI ethics is also something we need to discuss and facilitate.
Right. I mean, to build on that, there's this hope and this expectation and fear of general AI, that this will eventually lead to, I don't know, self-conscious machines and the such. And that's, and on the one hand, that's hype, and that's also a fear. I mean, at some point, perhaps 20 years down the line, there's going to be machines that's going to be beyond our control. It's a fear. And I see where you're coming from, Sina. There was this big push towards thinking machines in the 80s, and it fizzled out. And the hope here is that if such a fizzling out happens, it nevertheless brings us further down the field where we have deployable systems that actually add value to our lives. But perhaps, and it's perfectly fine to not have machines that are self-conscious. Perhaps that's the option that we should hope for, is that we push the ball far enough that it can be pushed, and maybe in our lifetimes, we don't have to deal with uncontrollable systems.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We are almost out of time here. It's 11:01.
Thank you for the presentation. Speaking about cloud and AI, could you please share your opinion about confidential computing on GPUs? What challenges are there?
Can you repeat your question? Sorry. What computers?
Confidential computing on GPUs. For CPU, we know some technologies like SGX from Intel or
Yes.
other, but what are challenges on GPU?
So if you have virtualized GPUs instead of virtualized CPUs, what new challenges do you have when you if you were to virtualize
Good.
GPUs?
Good question. Good question. I understand. So I was saying the biggest challenge is resource underutilized in GPU. For example, many GPU are hosting the inference service, right? And most of the time they are underutilized. And I think the biggest, one of the biggest hot research areas is how to harvest them. For example, the data center we're hosting, right? And what if the GPU are not being used? How can we harvest them to do something else, to do some maybe throughput-oriented workload or serve some latency-critical workload? I think it's a very important area to how to harvest the GPU time, the GPU memory at the same time and do it safely and efficient. I think this is a very interesting research topic. Actually, I was working on the CPU harvesting side, and I think GPU harvesting side is also a very exciting topic to explore. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
All right, time's up. I thank the panelists for an exciting discussion. I hope it didn't put you all to sleep. I found it interesting personally. But I thank everyone, Professor Gu, Professor Romanelli, Professor Shan, and Professor Shen for an exciting discussion.